The law is supposed to be about justice, or so the professors at Pacific State University claim. But in the Vance household, I learned that justice is a luxury reserved for those who are loved. In our house, love was a currency I didn't possess. My name is Elena Vance. For 24 years, I have lived as a ghost in a house of gold. To the outside world, we were the picture of Hispanic American success. My father, Arthur, was a corporate lawyer. My mother, Beatrice, was a titan of real estate. Behind the manicured hedges of Oak Creek Mansion, the hierarchy was absolute. At the top was Julian, my younger brother. At the bottom was me. It started with the birthdays. On my 8th birthday, I walked downstairs to find the dining room draped in streamers and a mountain of presents. My heart soared until I saw the cake. It didn't say, "Happy birthday, Elena." It said, "Congratulations, Julian, first steps." Julian was 3. My parents spent the day filming his wobbles while Beatrice told me to offer it up to the Lord. Offer It Up became the soundtrack of my life. The breaking point should have been my 16th birthday. Arthur called us to the driveway to see a brand new silver SUV tied with a red ribbon. I thought the years of straight A's and obedience had finally paid off. Instead, Arthur tossed the keys to 12-year-old Julian. "It's for your brother," he said. "He deserves to know it's his." When I asked why I received nothing, Beatrice told me to stop being transactional. That was the day I stopped praying. I survived high school by working 3 jobs and burying myself in books. When I got into law school at Pacific State, I asked my parents for a loan to cover the 20% of tuition my scholarships didn't reach. Arthur laughed in my face. "Figure it out yourself," he said. "Fuck off and get a loan. We've spent enough on you." Beatrice added that they had to save for Julian's future. He wanted to be a chef, and culinary school was expensive. I worked double shifts, lived in a tiny studio, and even taught Julian how to drive that silver SUV, the car that should have been mine. The snap finally happened on Julian's 19th birthday. My parents threw a massive gala to celebrate his acceptance into a local community college. My grandparents, Silas and Evelyn Montgomery, were there. Silas, a retired textile magnate, and Evelyn were the only ones who ever treated me like a person. During the toast, Silas announced they were paying Julian's full tuition and had bought him a house near campus. The room erupted in applause. I felt a cold, crystalline rage. After the guests left, I followed my parents and Julian upstairs. I hit record on my phone and tucked it into a bookshelf. "What the hell was that?" I screamed. "You wouldn't give me $5,000, but you buy him a house for getting into a school with a 100% acceptance rate?" Beatrice didn't hesitate. She slapped me, her gold rings cutting the bridge of my nose. "You've always been a bitter, jealous girl," she hissed, "a stain on this family." Arthur told Julian to go to bed and ignore my hysterics. As soon as they left, I retrieved my phone. I didn't cry. I uploaded the clip and tagged every relative, every one of my father's law partners, my mother's clients, the Montgomery Foundation, and the university board. I captioned it, "The Vance Family Values, a Summary." I woke up at 3 a.m. to my parents screaming and pounding on my door, demanding I delete the video. I stayed silent, feeling a strange peace. The next morning, the family group chat was a war zone. Amidst the insults from aunts and cousins, a message from Silas appeared. "Silver Fork Bistro, 10 a.m. Everyone." An hour later, we were in a private booth. The tension was thick. For 2 hours, my parents tried to justify the slap as a reaction to my instability. I simply played the video again. Finally, Silas spoke. What I saw in that video wasn't parenting, it was cruelty. He gave them an ultimatum: apologize to me and provide the same financial support they gave Julian, or be removed from the Montgomery will. The Sterling estate, the textile holdings, the trusts, all of it would bypass them. Beatrice offered a robotic, hollow apology. Arthur agreed, shrugging. It was fake, and Silas knew it. He looked at me with true solidarity. "Elena, you're done with Oak Creek," he said. "You're moving into the Sterling estate with us today." That evening, as we sat in the library of the Montgomery estate, Silas patted my hand. "We're still taking them out of the will, Elena," he whispered. "We just wanted the apology on record. Justice is best served with strategy." I laughed, believing the nightmare was over. The next morning, the peace was shattered. I found myself racing towards St. Jude's Medical Center with my grandmother gasping for air in the passenger seat. The diagnosis was acute toxicity. Someone had put a massive dose of concentrated laxative powder in her food. Given her age and heart condition, the resulting dehydration nearly killed her. My mind raced back to the lunch at the Silver Fork Bistro. Julian had been unusually helpful, refilling water glasses and hovering over the plates. When Silas arrived at the hospital in a rage, he asked one question: what did Julian do at the table? I told him everything. Silas immediately called his lawyer, a private investigator, and the bistro to demand security footage. As the ICU doors opened, my parents and Julian walked in wearing masks of feigned concern. Beatrice cried out, asking what had happened. I looked at Julian. He was pale, his eyes darting towards the exits like a cornered animal. I realized then that my Uno reverse was only the beginning. This wasn't just about an inheritance anymore. This was about survival. The antiseptic stench of St. Jude's Medical Center felt like a physical weight against my lungs. I stood by the ICU observation window, my reflection a ghost of the woman I used to be. Behind me, the heavy double doors swung open, announcing the arrival of the Vance family. My mother, Beatrice, led the charge, her face a masterclass in performative grief. Behind her walked my father, Arthur, his expression masked in corporate neutrality. Then there was Julian. My younger brother looked smaller than usual in his Pacific State University hoodie, hands buried in his pockets. When our eyes locked, I saw not guilt but a flicker of calculation, a predator gauging the distance to the nearest exit. "Elena, thank God you were with her," Beatrice cried, throwing her arms around me. She smelled of expensive perfume and her real estate office. "What are the doctors saying?" "She's stable, for now," I said, not returning the hug. I looked at my father, who was already pulling Silas aside. Silas, the pillar of the Montgomery textile empire, looked older than his 78 years, his face a mask of cold fury. "Where is she?" Arthur asked. "Vance & Associates has a retainer with the board here. We'll ensure she gets the best care." "She needs rest, Arthur, not a legal consultation," Silas snapped. He turned to Julian, who was feigning interest in a vending machine. "Julian, come here." Julian shuffled forward. "Is Grandma Evelyn going to be okay?" Silas stared at him with terrifying intensity. "The doctor said it was toxicity. Concentrated laxative. Someone put it in her food at the Silver Fork Bistro." "That's horrible," Julian whispered. "Who would do that?" I watched him, the slight tilt of his head, the way he didn't blink. He was good, but I had seen him at that table. I had seen him refilling glasses, his fingers hovering over the plates with a chef's precision. The doctors allowed us to see Evelyn in shifts. When I stepped into the room, the steady beep hiss of the ventilator provided a haunting soundtrack. My grandmother looked fragile amidst the wires. She squeezed my hand, her eyes clouded but cognizant. "Elena," she whispered, "the pasta, it tasted like copper." "I know, Abuela, rest now," I said. "The drive home," she continued, her grip tightening. "The pain. I didn't want to ruin the evening. I stayed in my room at the Sterling estate. I thought it would pass." I followed Silas back to the Sterling estate later that night. The massive limestone house felt like a tomb. In his study, Silas sat at the mahogany desk with a laptop open. The private investigator he had on speed dial had already been working. "Look at this, Elena," Silas beckoned. The security footage from the Silver Fork Bistro was grainy but clear. At 1:14 p.m., Julian stood up, ostensibly for the restroom, but the footage showed him slipping into the kitchen. He was gone for 38 seconds. The manager confirmed they're missing industrial-strength laxative powder used for grease traps, lethal for someone with her heart condition. He's worked in kitchens like that for his culinary projects. "Can we prove he put it in her food?" I asked. Silas shook his head. "The angle is bad. We see him return and hover near Evelyn's plate, but we don't see the hand movement. It's circumstantial. Arthur would claim Julian was just being a helpful grandson." So we wait. We wait for him to slip up. The next week was a psychological war zone. Evelyn discharged to the Sterling estate, a shadow of herself. Julian, emboldened, began visiting every day. I decided to play his game. I installed a discreet security camera in the hallway outside Evelyn's suite and began a meticulous log of every interaction. "I brought some special bone broth," Julian said on the kitchen. He smirked at me. "The chef let me use the prep station. It's full of electrolytes." "How thoughtful," I replied, "but the doctor has her on a strict regimen. We're only giving her what the nurse prepares." Julian's expression soured. "You're being paranoid, Elena. Is this about the Montgomery Foundation board seat, or that Mom and Dad are helping me with the Sunset Studio apartment?"
It's about Abuela staying alive. When I brought my concerns to my parents at their Oak Creek mansion, the reaction was what I feared. Alina, enough. Beatrice slammed her hand on the table. Julian expresses love through food. To suggest he would hurt his own grandmother is delusional. The footage showed him in the kitchen, Mom, I argued. Arthur looked up from his tablet. The footage showed a young man interested in his craft. Silas is looking for a villain because he can't accept Evelyn is aging. You're a law student. You should know the value of actual evidence. But Silas had seen enough. He changed the locks on the Sterling estate and hired a private nurse. The inner sanctum was closed to Julian. That's when the harassment began. Crude typed notes were slipped under Evelyn's door. You're a burden. The estate would be better off without the dead weight. Then her medications started vanishing. Blood thinners one day, heart pills the next. Julian was always nearby during the disappearances, offering to help search with frantic energy. I needed a smoking gun. I upgraded the hallway camera to 4K and hidden a second one in Evelyn's room behind a row of books. 3 nights later, at 3:14 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I watched the screen in horror. Julian had used a servant's entrance key to enter Evelyn's room. He stood over our sleeping grandmother for 3 minutes, a silhouette of pure malice. Then he pulled out a vial and stirred a clear liquid into her water glass. I hit record and immediately backed up the footage to my laptop, a cloud server, and an external drive. The next morning, I gathered Silas, my parents, and Julian in the library. I turned the monitor towards them and hit play. The room went silent. Beatrice gasped. Arthur went pale. Julian, however, didn't flinch. He watched the video with detached curiosity and then laughed. Nice try, Alina. It's a deepfake. What? Silas roared. Think about it, Julian said smoothly. Alina is a law student who knows what evidence she needs to cut me out of the will. She's tech-savvy and bitter. She probably filmed me in the hallway and used AI to mask me into the room. It's clearly manipulated. Julian, I saw you, I whispered. No, you saw what you wanted to see, he countered, turning to our parents. Mom, Dad, she's been trying to turn you against me for years. She was the one with Grandma when she got sick. Maybe she poisoned her to make herself the hero. The room split. My mother clung to the deepfake theory to protect her golden boy. My father, fearing a scandal for Vance and Associates, remained silent. Silas was too exhausted to fight their wall of denial. I need you to leave, Silas told Julian. Now, before I call the police. I'll go, Julian smirked. But remember, accusations without real proof are just slander, Alina. He walked out, leaving the family in ruins. Over the next few days, aunts and uncles took sides, mostly dismissing the video as a desperate ploy by a jealous sister. I realized digital evidence wasn't enough. If I wanted to stop him, I had to stop being the prosecutor and start being the mole. A week later, I called him. Julian, I said, faking contrition, I think the stress just broke me. I was so convinced it was you that I started seeing things. I want to apologize. I want to be a family again. After a long silence, he replied, I knew you'd come around. It must be hard knowing you're not the favorite. I asked to visit his Sunset Studio apartment. For the next 3 weeks, I played the devoted sister. I visited his sleek studio, played video games, and shared meals, suppressing my revulsion every time he touched my shoulder. He eventually grew comfortable, leaving me alone while he went to class. On a Tuesday afternoon, I found it. Hidden in a locked firebox beneath a loose floorboard were 4 leather-bound journals. The entries went back a decade. He had documented every manipulation against me since he was 9, but the most recent journal was a tactical manual for the destruction of Evelyn Montgomery. August 12th. The laxative was too crude. Need something more subtle. Digitalis? August 24th. Alina is watching. The deepfake defense is ready. If she pushes, I'll pivot the blame to Silas's dementia. There were research notes on toxins, their effects on the elderly, and sketches of the Sterling estate's security. I didn't take the journals, knowing he'd notice. Instead, I photographed every page with high-resolution, time-stamped images. I spent the next week in a fever of preparation, involving a forensic handwriting expert and a digital security firm to verify the metadata of my photos. I told no one. When I was ready, I called a final meeting at the Sterling estate. Another meeting, Elena? Julian asked, looking smug. I hope this one has better production value. My parents looked exhausted. Silas sat in his armchair with a thick folder in his lap. This isn't about production value, Julian, Silas said, with his voice regaining its strength. This is about the truth. He opened the folder and laid out the printed journal entries. The room went into a heavy, suffocating silence. I believe these belong to you, Silas said, sliding a photo of the open lockbox across the table. And I believe everyone here would be very interested in your thoughts on the entry from August 12th.
The silence following the handwriting expert's analysis was thick enough to choke on. Silas sat perfectly still, the journal entry spread across the table like a deck of cards finally called. Julian's reaction was a physical eruption. He lunged upward, his chair screeching against the floor. "This is a joke!" he screamed, his face crimson. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You planted everything. You've always been jealous of me, Elena. Ever since you realized you'd never be the favorite, you've been trying to destroy me." His performance was practiced, but cracks were appearing. Within 5 minutes, his narrative shifted from the journals not existing to them being creative writing exercises, and finally to the accusation that I had spent months forging them. "She's the one at Vance & Associates learning how to manipulate the truth," he yelled at our parents. My mother, Beatrice, looked devastated. Beside her, my father, Arthur, sat with his jaw tight. They tried to defend him, murmuring about sibling rivalry, but the evidence Silas held was too precise. The final blow came when Silas pulled a specific page, the entry from August 12th. Beatrice's hands trembled as she read it. In Julian's verified handwriting, he had detailed how he'd manipulated them into buying him a luxury car for my 16th birthday instead of giving me a gift, writing with pride about how he'd convinced them I didn't deserve a celebration. Beatrice stared at the page, her mouth agape. "Mom, she's lying," Julian whispered in his high, fragile, little boy voice. "She must have drugged me and stolen my keys. She's dangerous." Arthur stood up. "I want to see the original journals, Silas, not photos." "I left them there, Dad," I said steadily. "They are in the lockbox under his bed." "Convenient," Julian barked, "so they can disappear?" The meeting devolved into chaos. Aunts argued and grandparents suggested a high-priced therapist. But then my grandmother Evelyn spoke. Her voice cut through the noise. "I woke up 3 nights ago," she said, her eyes fixed on Julian. "I found you standing over my bed. You didn't see me open my eyes, but I did. My water tasted like metallic copper that night, and those notes telling me the estate would be better off without an invalid, they were written in that blue ink you love." For a second, Julian's mask slipped, revealing a flash of pure rage. Then he collapsed toward Beatrice, sobbing that I had turned the family against him. The meeting ended without resolution. My parents left with Julian, Beatrice shooting me a look of hatred. Only Silas and Evelyn remained with me. That night, I watched from a guest room window as Julian's car sat idling in the driveway for over an hour, a silent, predatory specter. The next morning, we found the mailbox destroyed. Security footage showed Julian systematically beating it with a baseball bat at 3:47 a.m. The responding police officer was dismissive, calling it a civil family dispute. The harassment escalated. Dead flowers were left on the doorstep. Silas's tires were slashed. Someone called in a false welfare check, claiming we were abusing Evelyn. Julian always had an alibi for my parents, who swore he was with them. Then, Evelyn's critical heart medication vanished from a locked cabinet. Without it, she was at risk of a cardiac event. While driving to a specialized pharmacy to get a replacement, I saw Julian's car. He didn't flee, he simply smiled at me and gave a mocking wave. This was now a war of attrition. We hired Catherine, a private investigator. She quickly documented Julian following Evelyn's nurse and tracked his digital footprint to forums where he researched lethal combinations of medications. The smoking gun came when Catherine photographed Julian buying diverted prescription narcotics from a dealer in a park. "We need to catch him with the substance in a place that proves intent to harm," Catherine cautioned. "We need to set a trap." We used the family group chat to announce that Evelyn had been moved to St. Jude's Medical Center for overnight tests, even specifying a room number. In reality, Evelyn was safe with Silas at a secure location. Catherine and an operative hid in the darkened hospital room while I watched from across the street. At 11:14 p.m., Julian arrived. Hidden cameras captured him entering the empty room. When he realized the bed was vacant, he panicked and searched the bedside table. He pulled out a bag of crushed opioids, a lethal dose intending to lace her food or water. Realizing he had no target, he called my mother, claiming I had kidnapped Evelyn. As he stormed out, he threw his messenger bag into a biohazard bin. Catherine retrieved it immediately. It contained the opioids and latex gloves. "We have him," she messaged. We took the evidence to the central precinct. However, before warrants could be processed, my parents arrived at the Sterling estate with Julian. Silas let them in. Julian looked calm and serene. He wore a look of practiced sorrow. "I want to apologize," he said smoothly. "I've even looked into counseling."
Beatrice dropped to her knees in front of me, clutching my hands. "Elena, please, he's realized what he's done. Let us handle this at home. Let us be a family again." I looked over my mother's head at Julian. He was watching me with a tiny, imperceptible smirk. He believed he had won, using our mother's love as a weapon. He thought his serenity was a shield, not realizing it was the final piece of evidence I needed to prove he was a sociopath.
The air in the Sterling Estates drawing room was thick with static. Elena, a second-year law student, watched her 19-year-old brother Julian with profound suspicion. To their parents, he was a repentant culinary student. To Elena, he was a master of deception. As he positioned himself between their grandmother, Evelyn, whom they called Granny, and the door, Elena noticed his hand twitching toward his pocket. "I think we all just need a moment to breathe," Julian said smoothly. "Let me make some tea, a peace offering." Their mother, Beatrice, sighed in relief, anchoring herself to the delusion that Julian was reformed. Julian specified he would use a special blend of hawthorn and hibiscus, ostensibly for Granny's heart palpitations. Recognizing a red flag, Elena excused herself and called Catherine, who had been monitoring Julian's recent suspicious activities. Catherine warned Elena she was 5 minutes away with a patrol unit and told her not to let anyone drink the tea. Elena watched Julian in the kitchen. A culinary student at Pacific State, he handled the preparation with surgical, shielding movements. When he returned with the tea on a silver tray, he bypassed his slumped father, Arthur, and went directly to Granny. As he offered the cup with a faux sweet smile, Elena lunged, striking the tray. The porcelain shattered and amber liquid sprayed the rug. The transformation was instantaneous. Julian's mask disintegrated into feral hatred. "You bitch! You ruined it! She was supposed to pay." When Arthur tried to intervene, Julian shoved him aside and pulled a professional paring knife from his pocket. His voice dropped to a terrifying whisper as he confessed his resentment. He was the mistake, and the second-born who received the scraps, while Elena got the golden path. The front door burst open. Catherine and 2 officers arrived, ordering Julian to drop the weapon. Instead of fleeing or crying, Julian laughed, a hollow, chilling sound. As he was handcuffed, Elena whispered to Julian, "This isn't over, dear sister. I'm just getting started on the menu." In the aftermath, Beatrice collapsed into a chair, sobbing not for Granny or Arthur, but for Julian. She accused Elena of provoking him. Catherine, meanwhile, sampled the tea. The field test revealed a lethal slurry of crushed opioids in digitalis. Despite the mountain of evidence, Arthur and Beatrice mobilized to save Julian. Arthur used his connections at Vance and Associates to hire a pricey defense attorney, even taking out a second mortgage to fund the defense of the son who had tried to kill their mother. The family was severed. Relatives blamed Elena for escalating a sibling rivalry, while others stayed silent. Granny remained safe but frail. One night, Elena told she was proud of her Vance spine and Montgomery heart. She lamented that Beatrice and Arthur had allowed Julian to become a monster by never setting boundaries, teaching him that people were merely obstacles. Catherine's investigation deepened. Julian hadn't snapped. He had planned this for years. His laptop contained research on inheritance law, poisons, and dark web contacts for fake passports. However, Julian's lawyer painted him as a troubled young man under academic pressure and victimized by a toxic sister. Beatrice told Elena she was dead to her for testifying. 3 weeks before the trial, the nightmare shifted. Catherine called with devastating news. Julian was gone. Arthur had pulled strings for a medical transfer to a hospital for psychological distress. Julian had cut his ankle monitor and walked out a loading dock to a waiting car. Security footage showed him walking with confident strides, even pausing to check his reflection. Paranoia settled over the Sterling estate. Then the packages began to arrive. The first was a photo of Elena at a grocery store with a note, "Family first." The second was a photo of the estate taken from the woods, zoomed in on Granny's bedroom window. Still watching, Catherine tracked him to a silver sedan owned by a woman Julian had charmed on a dating app. The law seemed to be closing in until the afternoon Elena left for 55 minutes to pick up Granny's medication. When she returned, the front door was wide open. The private security guard lay unconscious on the lawn. Inside, the house was a wreck, furniture overturned and vases smashed. Elena found the nurse bound with zip ties in the bathroom. She sprinted to Granny's room, but the bed was empty. The emergency alert necklace lay crushed on the floor. On the duvet sat a small folded note containing no words, only a pressed hibiscus flower and the St. Jude religious medal their mother had given Julian. As the wind rattled the windows, Elena realized the legal battle was over. The game had moved to a new, much deadlier venue. The silence of the Sterling estate was no longer a peaceful legacy. It was the suffocating stillness of a tomb. I stood in Granny's bedroom, the air smelling of her lavender perfume and the metallic tang of a shattered vase. The emergency alert necklace I'd begged her to wear lay on the duvet, its plastic casing cracked. Beside it sat a pressed hibiscus flower and a St. Jude medal, the patron saint of lost causes. Julian was telling me that Granny was a lost cause now. The police arrived in a blur of strobing lights. I gave my statement while technicians dusted for prints, though I knew it was a formality. Julian was too smart for simple mistakes. If he was desperate enough to snatch a 75-year-old woman in broad daylight, he wasn't leaving a trail he didn't want me to follow. My phone rang at 6:14 p.m. I signaled the technician to trace the call and answered on speaker. "Elena," the voice said. It wasn't the Julian I knew, the charming culinary student. This voice was a frozen lake, devoid of warmth. The little brother act was gone, leaving only the predator that had lurked beneath our family dinners for 19 years. "Where is she?" I whispered. "Granny is safe for the moment," he said, "but she's old. The stress isn't good for her heart." He didn't ask for a small sum. He wanted the Montgomery Foundation assets, the inheritance Silas and Evelyn had intended to give to me. He wanted the birthright he felt I'd stolen by being the overachieving firstborn. "He wants the money," he said, "and I want a video of you admitting every piece of evidence you found was a lie, that you framed me because you were jealous. Ruin your reputation, or Granny never sees another sunrise." "Julian, listen." 24 hours, Elena. I'll send a link for the transfer. If the police intervene, you can pick up what's left of her at the hospital. If there's enough left to find. The line went dead. The next 24 hours were hell. The FBI's hostage rescue team moved into the estate, their gear clashing with the antiques. My parents, Arthur and Beatrice, arrived at sundown. Arthur looked weak, his expensive suit wrinkled. Beatrice paced, her eyes darting toward the agents. "He wouldn't do this," she insisted. "Julian is a good boy. You pushed him too hard, Elena. He's just trying to get your attention." "He kidnapped your mother, Beatrice," Silas shouted from his armchair, his face a mask of grief. "Stop defending the monster you raised." Arthur tried to play mediator. "Silas, Julian is a culinary student, not a criminal. He's just in over his head." I looked at them with profound disgust. Even with Evelyn's life on the line, they were protecting the image of their golden son. The breakthrough came from Aunt Martha. Around 3 a.m., she called, sobbing. Julian had called her, demanding she invest in his getaway. Martha, paranoid by nature, had recorded the call. "I heard a woman in the background," she told me. "She told him to get the zip ties." FBI analysts enhanced the audio and found a match. Lydia Thorne, a career con artist specializing in estate fraud. She had a history of coaching young, entitled men through clearing the path to their fortunes. They tracked a vehicle registered to her alias to a remote hunting cabin 3 hours north. I begged to go, but Arthur used his legal authority to insist I stay back. Silas and I sat in the library, the clock ticking like a hammer against my skull. 7:23 a.m. The phone chirped. Silas listened for a long minute before closing his eyes. "They have her. She's alive," he whispered. I drove to St. Jude's Medical Center. When the ambulance arrived, Evelyn Montgomery looked small in her shock blanket, her silver hair matted. But when she saw me, she reached out a trembling hand. "Elena," she rasped, "you didn't give him the money, did you?" "No, Granny," I sobbed. "I didn't give him a cent." She managed a weak, triumphant smile before the doctors whisked her away. The aftermath revealed the depth of the betrayal.
Julian and Lydia Thorne were caught fleeing through the woods. In the cabin, investigators found Julian's laptop containing research on untraceable cardiac arrest, floor plans of the estate, and a hit list of family members who stood in the way of his control over the Vance and Montgomery assets. His new journals were filled with vitriol, viewing my existence as a clerical error. He wrote that our parents rightfully saw him as the true heir, while I was merely a placeholder. The trial was a medias circus. Julian tried to claim Lydia had manipulated him, but the evidence was insurmountable. His own voice caught on the cabin's security system showed him to be the dominant partner, coldly discussing which of Granny's medications to spike. On the day of sentencing, my parents approached me in the courthouse. Arthur's career was over, tarnished by the scandal. Beatrice reached out with tearful eyes. "Elena, honey, we were so wrong. Can you ever forgive us?" "You didn't just love him more," I said steadily. "You enabled a monster because it was easier than admitting you failed as parents. You taught him I didn't matter. I don't hate you, but I don't have room for you in my life anymore." Julian was sentenced to 25 years. Lydia got 30. As Julian was led away, his little brother charm was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. He'd gambled his family for gold and won only a cage. The healing process was slow. The Vance family died that day. On my 25th birthday, Silas and Evelyn officially adopted me. It was a symbolic gesture, but signing those papers made me a Montgomery by choice. The inheritance Julian had tried to kill for was placed into a trust for victim advocacy. I finished my law degree and now work with the elderly, protecting them from predators like the one I once called family. Granny lived for another 6 years, the best of her life, she often said. She passed away peacefully at 91, holding my hand. At her funeral, the front row was just Silas and me. Arthur and Beatrice, living a quiet life of atonement in the Midwest, were not invited. Now Silas is the one slowing down. We've remodeled the Sterling estate to feel like a home. Every Sunday we visit Granny's grave with fresh hibiscus. Last month, I received a letter from Julian in prison. He wrote about his progress and asked for a visit. I didn't finish reading it. I dropped it into the fireplace and watched it turn to ash. Some believe family is an unbreakable bond of blood. I know better. Family isn't something you're born into, it's something you earn. It's the people who stand by you when the lights go out. Julian is a ghost. But for now, the sun is shining, the garden is in bloom, and I am exactly where I belong. The cycle of favoritism and betrayal ended with me. That is the greatest legacy I could ever leave.